So what is a voter's guide intended to do? First of all, they synthesize what's already been reported. So hopefully over the course of the campaign, you've been doing dozens and dozens of great stories about the election. And what a voter's guide can do, particularly online, is create a landing page where voters can get all that information in one place. And you know, it can be a real chore to design these online, particularly if you have a website that makes it difficult to create a separate landing page. But we'll take a look at some examples, some things we've tried at the Missourian and elsewhere to get around that. But synthesizing all that information for people before they go to the polls can be a very handy thing to do. They also help last-second readers learn quickly, get up to speed. We all know that a lot of folks don't get engaged in the election until just a couple days before. It dawns on them suddenly, oh, there's an election on Tuesday. If I'm going to vote, I better get up to speed. I don't know who's on the ballot. I don't know what's on the ballot. A voter's guide can really get these people up to speed very, very quickly. And then, you know, if you give them this condensed information, if they so choose, they can go back and look at all the previous reporting you've done, maybe go deep on a particular race that's interesting to them or a particular ballot issue. So voters' guides can kind of conk people over the head and say, hey, wait a minute, dude, get busy and figure out what's on the ballot before you go vote. They allow easy comparisons among or between candidates. So you guys might remember during the first session yesterday when I was showing you all those statistics, one of the things that people said was most useful to them were side-by-side grids and charts that allow people to compare candidates' stances on issues. That's a difficult thing to do during the course of an election, sometimes because candidates are kind of all over the place. They're human beings. Sometimes their positions change. They're malleable. They get more input from potential voters. But if you're publishing your voter's guide just a couple days before the election, you can go back and you can say, okay, how does this candidate stand on each of these particular issues? How does that candidate's opponent stand on these issues? And put them right there side by side so people can compare them. Now, even folks who are paying attention to your election coverage, particularly if you're doing it really well, they might feel a little bit overwhelmed about all the information you've given them. And maybe they're still having a tough time making a decision which candidate should get their vote. They've read a story about transportation issues, they've read a story about property taxes, they've read a story about development, and they kind of have a sense of where these candidates are, but a voter's guide will allow them to compare them right there side by side in a very condensed manner, and that can be very useful to folks. They offer a chance to tell voters what they need to know to participate. We call this literacy at the Missourian. Straightforward information. When are the polls open? 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. Where do I vote? Well, that answer is different for everybody, but we can tell you how to find out where to go vote. You go to the county clerk, and you go to this particular page on the county clerk's site, enter your name, and it'll tell you where your polling place is. And by the way, the county clerk just a few days ago sent you a sample ballot and a new voter card and an announcement of where your polling place is, so maybe you can find that in your desk drawer at home or whatever. What if I've moved since the last time I voted? We tell you how you can figure out what to do if that's the case. What forms of ID are acceptable? That sort of thing. So a voter's guide is a good place to remind people of all those things. On the web, again, they can refer readers back to that tremendous volume of information, hopefully, that you've generated over the course of the campaign. And again, that can be a challenging thing to do, but I'm going to show you some examples, some of which are pretty good, and some of which not so much. And finally, they give you a great opportunity to rake in some additional advertising. Now, I'm not an advertising guy, but common sense tells you that if you're going to have a print edition that has a voter's guide in it 2 days before the election, a candidate might want to have a presence in that, right? Particularly if it's a special section that stands on its own. Because if somebody picks that thing up and opens it and starts looking at it and reading it, that's a person who, by definition, a candidate wants to reach, right? So the ad staff really ought to be raking in a bunch of ads for a voter's guide. At the Missourian, we don't do so well on that, and I'm not really sure why. The other thing I would say, and I know there aren't a whole lot of advertisers in the room, but maybe you can pass the word along to them, is that This is a place where advertising by a candidate probably ought to have some substance to it. Again, like I said yesterday, an ad that says, "I'd appreciate your vote on election day," doesn't do a voter much good. So if I'm an ad rep, and I'm not, but if I were, I would be encouraging these candidates to buy ads that say, "Here's how I stand on the issues, here's why I deserve your vote," not just the kind of the rah-rah thing. So, what's it take to pull these off? Planning, essentially, is the main thing. Remember that in print, a voter's guide needs space, particularly if it's a large election. You know, if you go back to the November 2012 election, you could do a 12-page voter guide on that really easy. And it's difficult to find that kind of space inside the regular print edition of your paper. The Missourian, our voter's guides generally run anywhere from 4 to 6 pages, but we have done more. We've also done less. A lot of it depends on the size of the ballot, again. But I can't remember the last time we did a special section at the Missourian. We nearly always cram these into our regular edition, which normally is 8 pages. But we decide, even if it's going to eat up most of our print edition, we think it's just that important when we're going to do it anyway. But think about whether a special section is warranted. Again, a big general election, I think you could make a really good case that a special section is the way to go. And also, to attract that advertising, I think candidates are going to be more attracted to a separate edition or a separate section of the paper than they are to the regular print edition. Planning, collect these head and shoulder shots that you need. We call them mug shots in the industry. Get those things early. Whether you're taking them yourself or whether you're asking the candidates to provide them, make sure you get them early so you're not scrambling at the last second to make sure you've got every candidate and, oh, these are 2 candidates we're missing. We got to get on the phone and ask them to send us something, and they end up sending us some low-res thing that we can't really use, and we end up saying, "Picture not available." That's pretty awkward. I think it's a really good idea to go ahead and shoot these photos yourself so that they're consistent in their quality and in their style and all that sort of thing. Recognize that really all of the writing for a voter's guide can be done way in advance. There's no reason reporters ought to be cranking this stuff out the day before the voter's guide is coming out. I mean, you know pretty early in a campaign where the candidates are going to stand on the major issues that you're going to want to line up in your voter's guide. Now again, sometimes those positions change and you've got to be keen to that, but most of this stuff can be done well in advance. Voter's guides generally have basic biographical information of the candidates. You know, how old are they? Are they married? Do they have children? Were they educated? What's their occupation? What's some of their civic memberships? And then you get into the issues. That stuff should be done weeks ahead of time. There's just no reason why it should be done the day before. Remember to present candidates consistently and to focus on the basics and the issues. So this is kind of your last shot, right? At the Missourian, our tradition is to publish the voter's guide in the Sunday edition before the Tuesday election. And then we'll pretty much go dark. You know, we might do a story in the Monday edition that reminds people there's an election coming up, but we're not going to break new ground on a campaign we've been covering for 6 or 8 or 10 weeks, right? No great big revelations coming out in the Monday paper or the Tuesday morning paper about this candidate or that. So you're going to have to make sure that you're fair to everybody, right? And that you're accurately representing their views and not creating big waves right before the election. Don't forget the ballot measures. You got to summarize those. This is something that can be done very easily in advance. I mean, you could write most of the content for an April 8th voter's guide today, right? We know who's on the ballot. We've probably got a lot of the basic information that we need, particularly on ballot issues. What's the issue? Is it a school tax increase? If so, what are the arguments for it? What are the arguments against it? How are they going to spend the money? How much money would it raise? Remember to tell people how much it would affect them. So if I own a $100,000 house, how much is it going to cost me in additional taxes per year? So basic description, arguments for and against, and then give them the actual ballot language if you can. Because we all know that sometimes when we sit down in a polling place and we start reading those ballot questions, it's just a bunch of gobbledygook that we can't even understand. So if the newspaper does the service of saying, here's what the ballot language is going to look like, and then here's a plain language version that says, here's what they're asking you, dude. you're doing a good job. And again, tell people where they can get more information if they want it. So if you're doing a print voter's guide, you want to remind people that, hey, we've got this really nifty website where you can go deep on any or all of this stuff if you want to. So let's take a look at some examples of voter's guides, some good, some not so good, and talk about what we like or dislike about them. This is one we did at the Missourian. Most of these are Missourian things. Because I had trouble finding a whole lot of voters' guides out there. We do one of these for every election. Let's see here. Probably should have had these links pulled up. So again, you know, the web can be a very difficult thing to work with when you're doing a voter's guide. The design can be very challenging. And we have wrestled with this at the Missourian for quite some time and tried a bunch of different methods. But this one, I think, is probably one of our better efforts. It's just got a little tiny setup. Hey, Tuesday there's an election. Here are the main things that are on the ballot. Here's what you need before you go to the polls. So if you click on that link, that's where you get all that literacy information that I was talking about. And then we go down here, mayoral race, the candidates on the issues. And these are links to the personality profiles that we did on the candidates. So if you want to go deep, you've got all that stuff right there handy. But you can also go here, and what we did here, this was a way to try to work around the limitations of the web in terms of design. Our website has a very rigid design constraints. So what we did was we actually created print products and then made them into PDFs and shipped them into Document Cloud. So this is Mayor Bob McDavid, the incumbent, and his challenger Sid Sullivan. We put them side by side in Document Cloud. And we tell people everything they need to know before they go to the polls. How old they are, family information, occupation. Here's their website if you want to go read about them there. There's their Facebook and Twitter accounts. And then we just boil down to the bare bones. Here's what they've got to say about each of these issues that was a major debate in the campaign. How do they feel about downtown zoning? How do they feel about the use of development incentives? What do they think we ought to be doing with the airport? And you can see, you know, these are very short answers, but, you know, we did in-depth coverage of these issues during the campaign, and it is a challenge, but it's not impossible to take somebody's stance and meaningfully boil it down to 1 or 2 sentences. So Bob McDavid says he would pursue what he calls the 40 and 2020 plan, of 40% of area customers flying out of Columbia by 2020. Good luck with that. That would be 500 passengers per day, and he wants more flights to Chicago and other destinations than a new terminal. And then you get how Sid Sullivan feels about the same thing. So once again, very useful side-by-side comparisons that you're not getting in the previous coverage. Bus system, streets, sidewalks, and trails, MU enrollment, what's going on with the police department, how do they feel about it, and then a separate question about how their perceptions of crime in the community, and then what are their other priorities. So that's a pretty useful thing, and we did this for each of the city council races that was on the ballot. Let me see here. So this landing page, I think, as I said, I think this might be one of the better attempts we've made to put a voter's guide online and make it really easy to navigate, because we have the same thing here for the 3rd ward. We have the same thing for the 4th ward. Whoops, I must have clicked on something. My apologies. And then over here, I'm not sure what is up with this thing. Over here, we're actually asking people, how do you think we did with our election coverage? Was there something we should have covered that we didn't? Can we contact you to get more information about that? I think that's a nice little touch. Down here, we described the 911 tax that was on the ballot last April. I hope we gave them the ballot language. We'll find out. So here's just a very basic description of what Proposition 1 on the ballot is, how much it would raise, how much it would cost, exactly how they would spend the money, and it looks like here it is. Here's the actual language that will appear on Tuesday's ballot. That way, when people get to the polls, they're not confused about this stuff. So is that something that you guys think is doable at your place? Yeah? Let me see here. Let's look at another example. This is one that I think was okay. This was our attempt to do this back in 2010. And again, it's a very similar thing. This one I think is a little drab in its design. It's not really attracting a whole lot of attention, but it's essentially the same stuff. When to vote, where to vote, what to bring, what to do when you get there. Well, vote. Change of address, what do you got to do if you've done that? If you want to cast an absentee ballot, which you're not going to be able to do that because the election's only 2 days away. And then again, we're breaking down each of the races. 9th District U.S. Congress. So let's click on Blaine Luetkemeyer and see what happens here. So we give people just sort of a synopsis of Blaine Luetkemeyer and his candidacy. And again, we did plenty of in-depth stories during the course of the campaign, and you can get those over here, related articles. Here's what you can find out about Blaine Luetkemeyer if you want to get some more information. Pretty straightforward stuff. Same thing for the state representative races. This was a November election. State auditor, U.S. Senate, county offices, and then we had a whole bunch of ballot questions that particular year. Some local ones, some state ones, and so we gave everybody a bare bones description of what each of those things were. So we do find, for those of you who don't do these, I think you really ought to consider doing them. They're not that difficult. Again, it's just about planning ahead, getting the stuff ready in advance. We get great feedback on these. Every time we do it, we get voters or readers who call us up and say, man, that thing was really handy. Print editions, and I'm going to show you some examples of those. We've had lots of people tell us, I just took that thing out of the newspaper, I folded it up, and I put it in my pocket, and I took it to the polling place with me. And it helped me make my decision. So here's another version. I believe this was something we did in 2008. A little bit different kind of design. So what you do here is you pick which race. You can go down here and just kind of start from scratch, or you can go up here and pick which race you're most interested in. So let's say Southern District Commissioner. Over here you get, again, all the literacy information, what you need to know if you're going to participate in the election. And then we get just a really boiled down synopsis of who the candidates for Southern District Commissioner are. You guys will recognize Karen Miller, who was here yesterday. And then Sid Sullivan again. He likes to run for public office. He never wins. It's interesting though, because Sid's a really smart guy and he's got some great ideas, but he never ever even comes close to winning. I'm not really sure why that is. He's run for state representative, county commission, he's run for mayor twice. Just can't seem to get over the hump. So, I could go on and on, but here's public administrator. So we do a little thing on that. We had 3 candidates for that, and we went all the way up to the governor's race in this particular one. This was the August 5th primary election. So we had quite a few candidates for governor, as I recall, and we just give a little synopsis of each of those. I hate this, photo not available. Ugh, can't stand it. And then we had Mr. Finkenstadt, who was running as a libertarian. So again, the web can be a challenge, but if you've got some decent web designers and they're thinking ahead, they should be thinking right now about what their voter's guide might look like online, rather than wait until the last minute. Let's take a look at what some other folks have done. Do we have our Bolivar Herald Free Press guy? Yeah, Matthew. Glad you're here. I wanted to call attention to this one. I don't know, would you guys call what we're about to look at a voter's guide per se?
Not really. We just like to...
Can you use a microphone, please? I'm sorry.
Not really. We just like to do the video interviews so people can... We think of them more like personality profiles. Mm-hmm. But when you listen to Rex, you'll have an idea of... when you do interviews, you generally like to clean up some of the language. Mm-hmm. And with Rex, we kind of wanted to avoid that because he has a very what we think of as a kind of like a down-home feel.
Right.
And
Down-home democracy.
we think the way he talks makes him more relatable.
Uh-huh.
And he agrees. I mean, we flat out told him that when we do these video interviews, if we transcribe anything to text, that we're not going to change anything. We're not going to clean up your grammar. We're not going to, if you say ain't, you're going to be quoted as ain't.
Right.
And so we see them more as personality profiles rather than the kind of voter guide, but it serves both purposes.
Right, and I included it here because, for one thing, I went to your website and I searched voter guide and this popped up. But also because all the interviews are here in one handy-dandy place, right? Do you know, I can't remember are there places from this page where you can link to other coverage you've done on the election? Or would somebody have to go somewhere else for that?
We use the blocks CMS, so there are ways that you can do that. It gives you recommended content, and then based on the different keywords that we select.
Okay.
And then you can also directly establish, kind of sibling assets to guide any readers after they've viewed this video. They can go and see, maybe Mr. Dreyer there, the second video on the right, he was the incumbent. So, there might have been a particularly contentious issue for the commission, and he may have taken a stance. We can link to that story so that people can see where he stands as the incumbent.
Right. So we have all the county commission candidates here. Do we have other candidates in this?
Kay Williams there is the sheriff's candidate.
Okay.
We do all of our city council or board of aldermen that are contested.
Right.
We do mayoral. We do pretty much the ones that we think people are going to find the most interesting. We have a very limited staff, so we have to decide where the greatest impact to readership is going to be.
Right.
And in this case, viewership.
And you guys have been doing these videos for a while, because I know when I did my thesis thing that I was referring to the other day, you guys had video interviews with the mayoral and city council candidates, and they were actually quite good. Well, let's take a look at one of these. Might not play the whole 4-minute thing, but let's have a listen to Mr. Austin.
This is my third primary in 4 years, and I was born and raised in Polk County.
Sorry about that.
And it looked to me like if you're going to make a difference, you've got to get in there and do it yourself. The system we've got now is it's drug on too long. We're not appealing to the right people. We need jobs relocated here, and we need to work with the city more. And not only on the equipment, we need to maybe combine insurance companies, whatever it takes to help us get by, get over this recession. And basically our kids don't have much to work with here.
So how did Mr. Austin do? Oh, sorry about that.
He actually won. So
did he?
Yeah,
Okay.
he's. We just did a. If you were to go on our website, you would see the kind of the 1-year anniversary video that we did with him, so that he could reflect on that first year in office and talk about what he saw as his accomplishments, both as a commissioner and just a new public figure.
Great. Okay. Let's take another look. This one is from the Charlotte Observer, which is a much bigger newspaper than most of the folks here are working at. But it's, I thought it was a pretty good example of getting all your election coverage in one place on your website. I don't know how to get rid of this ad. There it is. Whoops.
On this page, you can download MacKeeper, a
Give me
911
break.
app.
That's one thing I don't like about this site, and I'll actually demonstrate it. So we get some nice portraits of the two candidates for mayor, and we can get video of those candidates. But one thing, well, I'll let you guys see if you can guess what it is I don't like about this. So it starts with an advertisement. Your selected content will begin in 26 seconds. I don't know about you guys, but I'm not normally inclined to wait that long, right? Oh, Walking Dead, I can't wait. What's that? I'm not a big zombie guy, but that show, my wife watches it a lot, so I do too. But anyway, okay, so we had to wait all this time for what?
Hi, I'm Patrick Cannon, Mayor Pro Tem of the City of Charlotte. And of course, I want to be Mayor of the City of Charlotte, largely in part because I have the vision, I have the experience, and I have the capability of being able to lead Charlotte into the future. We need a mayor who has an understanding of economic development, public safety, a comprehensive transportation plan, and affordable housing in order to be able to move this community forward. I certainly possess that, and I certainly would love to have your support as mayor. Thank you.
What do you guys think?
I see.
Yeah, it's certainly devoid of any news content, right? And the commercial is shorter or is longer than the actual video. I'm not sure that the brevity of the video really bothers me that much. I mean, at least we get a sense that this is an articulate candidate. He's very well spoken. I didn't know before I watched that he was Mayor Pro Tem, but there's really no substance to it at all, right? It's like, I'd appreciate your vote on Election Day. But I mean, the saving grace, I think, is that, let's see, I don't know if I just hit the back button. It's only one component. Gee whiz, how do I get back to? I'm in an endless loop now. So that would be another thing I'm not a big fan of. Just go back to square one. But, you know, that video is just a very small thing. You know, we've got profiles on each of the candidates. We've got down here links to previous stories they've done on this race. Then we've got links to various city council races, Democrats, Republicans. Apparently they have partisan races there, a Libertarian running for city council. Where is my district? So here's that literacy information. So this is what I'm talking about when it's like put everything in one easy, convenient place, particularly for voters who haven't been paying attention, who might want to spend a Sunday or a Monday night before the election getting up to speed. And then we have all the school board referendums. It's all right here on one page, right? So if you avoid clicking on that video, you might be in pretty good shape, not get caught in that endless loop. And then finally, don't need to spend a whole lot of time on this one because Brian Wheeler showed you the Albemarle version of this yesterday. So this is actually a print product, but if you want to read it online, they did a very simple thing where they just turned it into a PDF. What could be easier? You know, if you're going to do a print voter's guide, particularly a special section, why not just turn it into a PDF, put it on your website, and let people download it? That's a pretty elegant solution, and I think the Missourian will probably consider doing this for our upcoming election. Pretty darn handy. And then finally, one more example of a voter's guide, and then we'll start talking about election night coverage. This is one, actually I have two more examples. This is another online voter's guide. I've seen a lot of versions of this kind of thing, and there are companies out there who sell this sort of software application that you can upload to your website, and theoretically at least, help a voter learn online what's on their ballot, compare candidates, that sort of thing. This is a very ambitious project. The St. Louis Post-Dispatch and League of Women Voters collaborated on it. They wanted to provide a voter's guide not only for St. Louis and St. Louis County, but all the surrounding counties. St. Charles County, Jefferson County, Washington County, Franklin County. So this really caught my attention, so I decided, let's see how it works. So if I go to, let's see, I wrote down a couple of addresses here. So you start by entering your address. So I'm going to go 200 Main Street. St. Charles, Missouri. And it wants your zip code. 63301, and hit enter. And it'll show you, if you want, you can click on Show Districts, and it'll tell you all the districts you live in. You live in Congressional District 3, Senate District 23, House District 65, et cetera, et cetera. You can do drop-down arrows and change districts if you want. See, that's the one thing I don't like about that. I haven't figured out how to get back to start my ballot after I click list my districts, so I got to go back here. Whoops. 200 Main Street. And then start ballot. And it will start listing one page at a time what's going to be on your ballot. And then you can choose 2 candidates from below to compare. This is another thing. I wish you could compare more than 2 candidates at a time. I guess that's just an interface problem. But let's say I want to compare Jim here to Tyler. I spent a lot of time on this, and most of the times that I clicked, I got this response. Candidate response is not yet available. I did this for St. Charles, I did it for Washington, Missouri, I did it for St. Peter's, and I kept getting candidate response not available. Candidate response not available. I found it very frustrating, and if I were somebody who actually lived in one of these areas, and you're promising me that you're going to give me this information, and I'm spending the time to try to get it from you, and you don't have it, you know, I'm going to be pretty darn frustrated with you. Let's see if I can actually find anything on this. I did manage to find a couple of candidates, but not very many. So I guess my message here is if you try something like this, be careful that you don't promise something that you're not going to deliver. Maybe Washington was one where I did get some results. We'll find out. We tried this several years ago. The Missourian and KOMU TV collaborated on a thing that we called Smart Decision 06. And KOMU TV has a much broader viewership area than we have a readership area. So we ended up having tons of House races and congressional races where we were deploying reporters to try to solicit this information and feed it into a system that was much like this, but we failed miserably. We did the same thing that this thing does, promising a whole lot of people that we were going to have some information for them that we just didn't. So let's try, yeah, here you go. Washington Council Member Ward 1, Tom Coulter and Walt Meyer. At least we know the names that are on the ballot, right? But we don't have pictures of these people. We don't have any biographical information. What are your 3 top priorities? Candidate response not, well, I'm going to choose that candidate, right? Let's see if the next one. So again, I think the intent here is wonderful, and the ambition is laudable, but if you can't deliver the goods, maybe you shouldn't even be putting it up on your website, right? Stick to what you do have. Again, over and over and over again. So, I wish I could show you one that works, but I can't find one. Okay, and then I want to show you one more example. This is a print version of what we've done at the Missourian. I think I'm going to have to go to a folder and pull that up because it's not on the web. Let's see here. Where'd that go? There it is. Bear with me if you would. So the one thing, you know, that we always try to do at the Missourian when we have a print voter's guide is to tease prominently to it from the front page, obviously, so that people know that it's there. It makes a pretty dynamic design element for your front page. And then here is a print version of what I was showing you earlier that we did on the web, one race at a time. You get all the candidates for city council lined up, nice portraits, pretty consistent style and quality on the portraits, basic biographical information, and then you get their stances on all those same issues that I was showing you earlier. Downtown zoning, development incentives, airport, bus system, streets, sidewalks, trails, MU enrollment, police department, crime, other priorities. So this is a ton of information packed into one page. And people, like I say, people just ate this up. We heard from a lot of folks who said, man, that's the most useful thing you did for this entire election. All the in-depth reporting aside that we did, this is what they liked most. And a lot of people took it to the polls with them. So, any questions? Yes?
When you filter that down to one paragraph, do the candidates have an opportunity to see it, to make sure it concisely reflects what they stand for?
The honest answer is no. We do, at the Missourian, do accuracy checks when we're interviewing candidates and doing the regular reporting for the stories that lead up to this. But we haven't been in the habit of running these condensed views of their stances by them before we publish them. But I will say that we've never had a candidate say that was just wrong. You know, you mischaracterized me. But probably it would be a good idea for us to do that. Just say, hey, you know, we had to boil this down to 1 or 2 sentences. Want to run it by you and just make sure it's right. That's something we probably should be doing. Other questions? So I'm curious, those of you who don't do these, do you think it's something you might be able to pull off? Or are you inclined to do them? Yeah? Yes, sir.
Certainly inclined to do them, but the reason it's not being done is the profitability factor. May I answer the question?
Yeah, can you use the microphone? Sure.
The reason our local paper isn't doing that right now is because of the profitability factor. They just haven't come out good on the online version in the past. Also, it was quite obvious that people were stopping their subscriptions and getting the news for free online. Wouldn't pay for a paid subscription if you had a paywall. I asked the Bolivar gentleman, your website and voter's guide was fantastic with the videos and everything, but may I ask, are you coming out on it? Is the print media advertising and subscription sales subsidizing the website?
We actually have a paywall for our website, but our multimedia content is free. As far as whether, in the context of the election, I don't necessarily know that the ad sales are subsidizing all the additional stuff we do for candidates. But in the instance of this Rex Austin video, the one that we saw, it's one that we were going to do that interview anyway. We just put a little bit of extra effort. We don't have anything more than a little flip cam, or we use our iPads. That's what we do our videos with. So we don't have a whole lot of extra video equipment. We don't have, we really just take a little bit of extra time to be able to prepare for an interview that we were going to do anyway. And we just go ahead and make it, you know, we go ahead and do it as a video interview. And it doesn't really require a whole lot more in terms of, you know, I'm not paying overtime to my reporters to cover any additional costs. So, because we were already going to do that interview anyway. I don't know if that helps you or not, but.
Okay, this is another page of the same voter's guide. So this guide took 2 full pages in our print edition, plus the banner teaser that we did on the front page. And the Missourian, we're really strict with our page count. Our print edition A section is 8 pages. And I have asked and begged and said, can we get more pages for the vote? No. But we'll go a 4 or 5 page voter's guide and still stick to an 8-page A section if that's what it takes, because we just think this stuff is that much, that important. But this is the opposing page, page 6 of the same paper, where we summarized all the ballot issues. Again, you'll see basic description, how much money would it raise, how are we going to spend that money, arguments for and against, and then the actual ballot language. So we did that with the 911 tax, a charter amendment on eminent domain, and then here's all the literacy stuff, what you need to know before you go to the polls, and I'm not sure. Then I think, actually it didn't take quite an entire page because we had some jumps that we were able to get on that page 6. So about a page and a half of our print edition for that voter's guide. It was a very small election.